Welcome to Girl Dad Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Thompson. Here we share real stories of dads raising confident, outdoor-loving daughters and women reflecting on who first opened the door to the wild for them.
From sunrise lands to firelight hours, watched them bloom like wildflowers. This is our story, wild and true. Girl Dad Outdoors, raising daughters with a view.
My whole childhood was just out on adventures with my folks. We felt like we had accomplished something together as a family. It was real bonding.
How are you taking those and applying them to your 5 kiddos?
Yeah, it's hard. This day and age is hard. There's a lot of pressure.
Let's dive into the stories that inspire the next generation of outdoors women and help the everyday dad strengthen relationships with their daughters through the outdoors. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Girl Dad Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Thompson. And today we have a veteran of Alone the Beast, Season 1, Episode 1, a fitness coach and freelance writer, Lindsay Persico. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So here at Girl Dad, we like to talk about the journey that dads and daughters take to come together and find their way to the outdoors. So tell us a little bit about, first of all, your current family structure today. Let's talk about where we're at, and then let's talk about how you got there. So give us a little background on your husband, how many kids, the ages, and the breakdown of girls to boys, and so on and so forth.
Great. I live in Montana, like you said. I lived off-grid in Idaho when I was over there, where I had my first 2 kiddos. So I have 2 daughters, age 17 and 18, which is weird. And then I have 3 boys, ages 3, 8, 11. My husband and I met after my 2 daughters and I ended up on our own out at that little off-grid cabin. And we got married and we had our son. And then we ended up deciding to do foster and adoption. So we adopted our 8-year-old and now we're fostering our little 3-year-old.
Very cool. So you like having a large family and a very spread out family as far as ages. So is your husband big into the outdoors as well, or is it mainly yourself?
No, he is. He grew up, for the first part of his life, he was in Wisconsin. And his uncles did a lot of hunting, and he, kind of got his first introduction to hunting there. And then he moved out with his mom, dad, and sister to Montana when he was early teens, I would say. And they lived in a little off-grid cabin for a while out here. And he got a little more into hunting there. He met a man who kind of was a hunting mentor to him and kind of got into elk hunting. And that's really his passion now. He does hunt deer and he hunts antelope, but his big passion is elk hunting.
Nice. So take us back. Born in Idaho. Siblings, how many people were in your family when you lived in Idaho?
It was just 4 of us. It was my dad, mom, and me and my brother. My brother was about a year and a half older than I was.
Okay. And I'm assuming an outdoor driven family?
My dad was the hunter in the family. My mom was fun, but she wasn't really interested in hunting herself. She was very supportive of it, but it wasn't something she was interested in doing. She did things like ride motorcycles. She she was her own kind of outdoors person, but not in the hunting aspect.
There's no such thing as a wrong type of outdoors person.
No.
And there was such a key component there because she was supportive, right? That's the number one thing. Even if the other side of the equation doesn't partake, supporting is so important.
Yes, that helped a ton because it gave my dad the freedom to go and take us kids and do those things. And then she was a big champion of it. She was like your cheerleader, I guess you'd say. She'd, get up and make a snack for everybody to bring, or she'd make sure, she just did all those supporting elements, those supporting pieces. And even now in my life, like she's one of the reasons I get to do all of the crazy things I get to go do is because my mom's so supportive. She'll come over and help me out with the kids while I'm gone so I can go and chase these things that I love, which is huge.
That's great. So outside of hunting elk, did your dad do a lot of other outdoor activities, or was he work? What did he work and then just go and do things sporadically through the outdoors, or was he always roaming around?
My dad worked almost my whole childhood at a lumber mill. And it was a shift work kind of job. So he was constantly changing his schedule. Sometimes he'd work nights, sometimes he'd work swing shift, sometimes he'd work days. And his schedule for the majority of our childhood was 4 days on and 4 days off work. So my mom ended up deciding they both decided to homeschool us because otherwise we would have hardly seen my dad with our regular school schedule. So she homeschooled us and she set our curriculum up in a way where we did school for 4 days and then we had 4 days off so that we could go do things with my dad. So when my dad was off of work, him and my mom together on their own built an entire house kind of throughout my childhood. So a lot of our time when he was off was spent either working on that project or we had family property that'd been in our family for about 5 generations. And we would go out there and we'd cut wood, or if it was hunting season, we would go hunting. One of our kind of favorite activities as a family was to just hop in the truck and then we would just go out into the mountains and drive and stop and find a stream and go play in the creek or go get stuck in the snow and go sledding. And so we did all of that kind of stuff. My whole childhood was just out on adventures with my folks or working on building a house.
Yeah, and just going for a drive, that's so important because with my kids, 4 daughters, none of them liked the same thing. All of them wanted to participate at different levels. One of them, it was get a coffee drink, go for a drive, and see how many animals we can spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the outdoors isn't just hunting. It isn't. There has to be gateways to it, and those, like you just explained, that's such an important component to it.
Yeah, I remember growing up loving any of the things that we did out there. I loved it when we would go and cut firewood. To me, that was fun. It gave me an opportunity to accomplish something with my family. It felt like an accomplishment. Those opportunities to go out and do something where there's a little bit of difficulty involved in it, but there's also my folks always made it fun. They would bring snacks, they would bring, they made it fun for us kids, but also then at the end we felt like we had accomplished something together as a family. It was a real bonding experience.
Yeah, we've experienced the same taking the kids maple syruping.
Yeah,
It's
that'd be cool.
yeah,
We
so
didn't have that opportunity, but that would have been fun.
yeah. So fast forward a few years, little Lindsay, now it's time to start going out with your dad, maybe experiencing a hunt. Are there any moments in that time frame that kind of resonate where you can think whether it may not have to be killing your first animal, but is there something in there that made it click like, okay, I really enjoy this and this is something that I want to do?
Yeah, it's actually, my first memory of going out with my dad hunting is very early. I'd say I was probably about 3 years old, maybe 4 years old, and he didn't take me out on, like, a big hunt. Obviously, I was a little tiny kiddo, but what he did was he took me out in the evening, and he was just trying to locate elk. He was, before season, or maybe it was a day before he was gonna go out hunting. He took me out to this spot. It was like a big open grassy meadow area where he just was gonna bugle in the evening and just see if he could locate some elk before the next day. So, he took me out there, and I remember very vividly, like, us walking through it was the fall, so the wild grasses were really tall, and I was short and little, so I was walking behind my dad through this meadow just with this grass, like, over my head, and I remember just sneaking through there and feeling the grass on my fingers, and it was experiencing nature in the most beautiful time that nature is, the evening, right before dark. He sat me down in this tall grass, and it was just like a little cocoon. I was just surrounded in this tall grass, sitting there quietly, listening to my dad bugling and trying to get elk to answer back, and in that moment, I remember just falling in love with that feeling of just being out there in this beautiful moment. It was fall, so the elk were bugling. It was like September. It wasn't cold, but it was cool. And the smells out here in the fall when everything's dried up and it's crunchy, it just smelled cool, it sounded cool, it was a very, very, formative experience for me in that my dad just brought me along, little 3, maybe 4-year-old kiddo, plopped me in the grass in the evening, and just I got to sit there in my own little world surrounded by my grass and listening to him bugle. It was pretty cool.
That's amazing. So you think about how for your dad, he didn't plan that as a life moment, right? That was just taking you along, but how formative that was. Now fast forward to you're in the middle of your season on Alone, probably one of the most mentally challenging times. Plenty of challenging times, but like you purposely placed yourself in this harsh environment. Did you go back to any of those places, any of those experiences to help calm yourself? Or how did you traverse that? And did any of those learnings and any of those those formative moments that were a sense of calm, did they help you through that at all? Or was that not a component of it?
You know, those moments, that was just one example of many, where my dad just included me in things, but one of the things my parents did when I was growing up is they instilled a lot of confidence in me. They taught me that I was extremely capable, that I had purpose, um, and that I could do anything that I set my mind to. That was definitely a theme of my childhood. It was like the world's your oyster. It's just up to you what you want to do with it. People have mentioned, alone being, one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I've always told people it really wasn't. It was not because I had had some really difficult experiences in my life before I went on alone. But what I will say is the hardest things that I've gone through in my life, the really tough times, it all does come back to those foundational things that my parents taught me of, you can do anything you set your mind to, and you're a very capable person and you have a purpose. There's more to this life than just, live, have kids, find a career, make money, die. There's a purpose to this life. I believe that we have a creator and he has designed our lives in a purposeful way, and he's given us skills and abilities to go out and complete that purpose and complete that mission. And that foundation that they instilled in me carried me through all the hard things I've experienced in my life, including alone.
That's such a great explanation. It's the holidays are such an interesting time, right? Because it's so material focused,
Mhm.
where we like to give experiences because it's something that it's not perishable, right? If you give an experience, it lives on. So you just spoke to that. Those experiences have helped you through your entire life into adulthood. So how are you taking those things that you did with your parents and those learnings, how are you taking those and applying them to your 5 kiddos, and what are some of the tweaks that you've taken to maybe modernize them, figure out a way to reduce screen time, keep them in the moment so they understand that these moments actually mean something?
Yeah, it's hard. This day and age is hard. There's a lot of pressure, as your kids get older. I've got them at all the levels now. So I've gotten to watch, my daughters grow up and go through the pressure of, oh, my friends have phones and everybody's on this app or that app. And I've made mistakes and I, have learned a lot, raising my daughters of like, okay, this is beneficial for them. This is important for them to know. And these things over here, they might not like it, but they're going to survive it and it's going to be better for them in the long run. And it's been really cool having older kids and getting to talk. I have a very special relationship with my daughters and they're my best friends. And we've talked a lot about the things that I did in their childhood that really helped them and the things that I did that made it harder. And I think it's helped make me a better mom to my boys. And I have a better understanding of what they need and how I can best support them in this day and age. But yeah, I took a lot of what my parents taught me and tried to create some of those same experiences for my kids. And what I've found, having 5 kids now is that every single one of them is so different. And the things that they're interested in are so different. And the way that you connect with them is different. And so you really have to get to know your kids. You can't just expect to go and do the same thing that you did with the first one and have the same outcome because they're individuals and they're very unique. So you have to get to know them and you have to try to understand what they need from you and meet them where they are. Um, all my kids are a little bit different. My oldest son is just now really getting into fishing, and my husband loves fishing, and so we've just deep dove into that with him, and we're fully giving him the space to explore that and to, get learn things on his own, even though my husband, he's a really good fisherman. And, he's wanted to multiple times be like, well, that's not the fishing pole he needs. He needs this fishing pole. And I'm like, yeah, but you got to let him explore. You got to let him figure out what he wants and what he's interested in, what works. Cause that's part of the magic of the process is figuring it out on your own. If you just get handed all the tools and you don't go through that process of learning it yourself and exploring it, having help along the way so you get some of that success that kind of keeps fueling that fire is great. But letting them go through that process of exploration and curiosity is what builds that just passion for it in you. So that's been interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I figured that out the hard way, right? Because I grew up not hunting. My dad, we were dairy farmers, so it was either you were working or you were working. And then my mom would force him. Back in the day, we only had 2 days of deer hunting. These 2 days, you have to take Greg deer hunting, and that's the extent of hunting with my dad. So then when I became an adult, I was all in. That's all I did all the time. I was always out in the woods. Then I had kids, and it's like, "Come on, let's go." And it took a minute to figure out, like, "Okay, this isn't my experience anymore." You need to Your experience goes to the back of the line, and it's all about what matters for that kid. And one of the stories is I took the first year I took my oldest daughter deer hunting. We were up in the middle of the woods, my buddy's hunting shack. She asked if we could go to my farm. So my home farm, there's no farm there. It's just a grove of trees, and it's an hour drive. And we're sitting there, and she's like, "Dad, can we go to it's cold. Dad, can we go to town? Dad, can we go to town?" I'm like, "The sun's not even up, like, relax." And finally, I figured out the only reason she wanted to go hunt there because she wanted to go to Casey's and get breakfast pizza.
Yeah. Yeah. I get
So
that.
so guess what? I didn't care anymore. We'd
Yeah.
go and we'd go get breakfast pizza. So that's such a great story. So
That was one of the things that my dad did that was really important, I feel like, and I don't know how much he knew that it was important, and he might have because I think it was kind of formative for him in his learning of hunting. He learned mostly from his grandpa, and his grandpa, kinda had traditions that they would do, and so traditions became important to my dad. But they were those kinds of traditions where, when him and I would go up for his he would go for a week or 2 elk hunting, and he would take me with him, which was a huge blessing, looking back, because a lot of dads wouldn't have done that with their young daughters, but my dad did. But every time we went, we always stopped at the same place, and we always got the same things. We got steak finger bites, for the drive up to elk camp, and then he always brought the little raspberry-filled, um powdered sugar covered donuts. We always had those in the morning before we went out on our hunt, and those kind of traditions, were something that we looked forward to. We shared them together, and so we would talk about them. And even now, he still has his elk camp, and I don't get to go for the whole time because 'cause I've got 5 kids. My life is very busy, but I always try to sneak up there for at least a weekend with him while he's at elk camp, and I always bring powdered sugar-covered raspberry-filled donuts because, it's the tradition. It's always been what we did, and it bonded us in that way.
that's great. So, do any of the kids go to elk camp with you?
Yeah, I have taken different ones with me. I haven't taken many of them, I don't think, out on the hunts with us. So my dad does archery elk hunting,
Okay,
which you gotta be real quiet, and, the more people you have in the woods, the more scent is in the woods, the harder it is to get your elk in that close. So I don't bring a lot of them out in the field with us, but I'll bring them to camp, and I'll bring motorcycles. They'll go ride the motorcycles, my older ones. I've brought the little guy, and they just have fun. My mom usually comes up, and my dad sets up a really nice camp up there, so they'll hang out at camp during the day, and we'll go out for a morning hunt and an evening hunt and come back midday and hang out with everybody.
that's great. And one of the things that I had to do the first year I brought Olivia hunting, I needed to advocate for her because it was a traditional guys only camp. No females ever stayed there. And I said, "No, she's coming." And a few of the guys fought it, but it was okay once she got there. Everyone adapted. So you have to advocate for your kids as well to include them. Either do it by yourself or make sure your friend group is supportive. So
That
that's
was
something as well.
that was probably the biggest thing that my dad ever did for me, was how he included me in his hunts. So, when I was growing up, we had traditional things that happened, like, every year, certain hunts always happened. My dad had friends from Delaware that would come out and go whitetail hunting with him, and they would hunt from our house, like, they would go out early in the morning, every morning, do their whitetail deer hunting, go out in the evening, but they'd always base camp kind of at the house, and so us kids would sit around, and I remember listening to my dad and his friends, tell their hunting stories. They'd come back and I would always be like, "Did you see anything? Did you get anything?" It was always exciting, we wanted to know how the hunts were going. We wanted to see the deer when they brought them back, and as a little kid, I loved sitting around just listening to them talk. And I remember them telling stories, but as I got older, my dad would start to include me in the stories. And, he always talked. This was the biggest thing I remember about my dad, and I think it made the biggest impact on me as a little girl. My dad always spoke incredibly highly of me. He would brag about me to his friends, he would brag about my stories, and he would talk about them with just as much excitement and passion as he would his own stories. And, when I started hearing myself included in his stories, that meant the world to me, and I was really blessed that he was surrounded by such good guys because they always were more than welcoming, actually more than they were excited when I was coming. They made me feel very welcome, and my dad always acted like his hunts were better if I was with him, and never made me feel like I was a burden. He made me feel like I was a blessing when I was there, and that was huge for me as a kid.
That's a good guy right there. He got it from the get-go. And it's such a good point because as a dad, everyone's always waiting for their son. At this point with 4 daughters, I don't know what the hell I'd do with a boy in the mix. Like, it would just be foreign to me. But what resonated for me one time, I was in my 30s, and my dad's like, "Oh, that's my boy, Greg." And it's like, I'm a 30-year-old man, and it's like, "Oh, that's my boy." And
Yeah.
it's just like, to your point, like, your dad spoke so highly of you and included you in the stories. That's my girl.
Mm.
It's just so common to hear that's my boy. We need to make it more common to be that's my girl.
Yeah, and that, to your point, I never realized how lucky I was until I started working with women and talking to women in the outdoors, and I realized how lucky I was, how rare it was for especially a dad with an older son to take his daughter, because a lot of times the girls were not welcome at the hunting camps. They were not included in the hunting camps, especially if there was a son. The son would get taken and the daughter would not be included. And my dad wasn't like that. And I'm so grateful that he wasn't. He included his son. He took his son too, my brother, but he paid attention to who was most interested. And it turned out that when we were young, I was more interested in it than my brother was. And so he leaned into that. He's like, "She really wants to go. She's really interested in this." And he included me in everything I wanted to be included in. There was never a time where I was like, "Dad, can I go with you?" or "I wanna go with you." And he was like, "No, I don't want this one's hard," or whatever. He always took me. And I was lucky because that was not the case for a lot of the women that I've come across and a lot of the women that I've taught.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, even to what you just spoke about, if you weren't included, it's just so easy to give an explanation because, especially today, you mentioned it, everyone, I'm on this app, this person has a phone, the on-demand gratification of everything. So if I'm not included, why am I not included? Hey, buddy, I have this going on, but set the understanding of why you're not included, and maybe set the next time you will be included. That's such a good path forward because all it takes is one negative experience for them to stop being interested for a month, and so much can happen in that month when kids are young.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. If you, because there are things that you can't bring a little kiddo on, that's just a reality. They just wouldn't it would probably ruin it for them because it would be so difficult and they'd be so uncomfortable. Um, but I think that that's huge in the opportunity there to set a time, like, "You wanna do this? I love that, and I wanna take you. Let's do it this time, at this frame, time frame." And set it up with them so they have that to look forward to instead of just saying, "Well, no, you're not big enough," or "It's too hard for you." That's I think would be huge for a lot of kids.
So when I reached out to you, you had mentioned that you also just wrote an article about the similar topic. Do you want to talk a little bit about where that's going to be published and give a little backstory on it?
Sure. I write for Western Hunter magazine, and they ask me to do articles. A lot of my articles for a few years writing for them were on hunting related fitness and nutrition. Um, and then I've done wild game recipes for them as well. But we've started to kind of move into more passion pieces, which is my favorite kind of writing. And I mentioned, writing an article about how my dad introduced me to hunting, and they were like, "Yeah, that sounds great." So that one will be coming out later this year in Western Hunter. Um, but I think in writing that article, I was it was the first time that I was really aware of how well my dad did that, the introduction for me into the outdoors. And one of the big pieces in there that stuck out to me was how he was really passionate about it and he loved it, not just filling a tag, but just the entire process of hunting. And the way that he relayed that to me and basically kind of passed that passion on to me. And I think that it was really cool because it was the fine details, the small things that he allowed me to kind of get in on. He shared with me and opened my eyes to um, the little things that you experience in the outdoors and how cool they are. And he helped me fall in love with wildlife and plants. And like I remember we'd be sitting there, maybe we'd been calling for elk and nothing had been happening. And so he would just start pointing out the different trees to me and he would teach me about the kinds of trees. And he'd teach me about, the smaller things, helping you be really present in the outdoors and present in the moment and where you are. Those are the things that really helped me develop a love for the outdoors. And that kind of stuck out to me more than I had realized in the process of writing that article, which was pretty cool. But he was really smart about how he introduced it to me and just the different levels that he did. And I think some of it was on purpose and some of it was by accident, but it ended up being the perfect combination for me.
That's great. So for anyone who wants to look at that article, just Google Lindsay Persico Western Hunter, and they should be able to find a list of all Lindsay's articles. There were a couple things I wanted to dive on there. The power of foraging, right? Because not everyone's a hunter, not everyone fishes, but everyone can go for a walk. And understanding what is on the ground or in a tree so a kid can be involved because the kids are curious. They're always looking around. So if you give them something to look for, is that something that you've done with your kids or do you guys go out and foraging?
Yeah, there are specific things that we look for every year. My dad always was excited for morel season out in Idaho, and so that kind of was a start of an introduction of that for me. But this kind of carries over even into alone. So my oldest daughter, I vividly remember this. There was an article that was done for Onyx Hunt, and they followed me and my daughter on a hunt and were filming it. And I remember talking with them about how my daughter kind of reopened my eyes to that world of just kind of looking at the small things instead of the big picture. We can get out there and we're hunting. We're so focused on finding the animals and finding our approach and paying attention to the wind and those things. And we miss some of these small things. I'm like always in a hurry. I got to get to this spot. I got to get to this ridge. I want to be here before the sun comes up. I want to whatever. But my daughter was, little, and little kids, they notice, like you said, they notice everything. And so you have to slow your pace down out there with kids and give them those moments to just dive into whatever it is that catches their eye. It might be a bug. It might be, something on a tree, some pine cone that they stepped on, and it was annoying because it was loud, but it's like their focus goes to all these little things, and it's really important that we give them the space and the time to explore those and to pique that curiosity and let it develop because it is what creates that love of the outdoors in them. And I when I was on alone, I did something for each of my kids while I was there. So I had 3 kids when I was out there. I had my 2 daughters and my oldest son. And they didn't put it on the show. When the show aired, I had told my kids that I had done something for each of them, but they hadn't included it in the show. They had to cut a lot of stuff out to fit it on TV. So I reached out to the producer and they were so kind. They actually dug that footage out for me that I had self-filmed for my kids and they sent it to me so I could show the kids, which was so cool. But the thing that I did for my oldest daughter was I went on a walk and I tried to see this place as she would have seen it because I was very focused on survival. I was like, got to get my firewood, got to get my water, got to keep things dry. But it was a really cool place. I was in a beautiful environment, one that I had never been in before. And so I took a nature walk and I filmed all the things that I thought would have caught her eye. And I tried to see things that she would see. And it was really fun because it took me back to those early days of taking her out in the woods and just following her basically around. We had a mission and I was kind of leading the way, but it was one of those like a dog in the brush, over here and over there and over here to see all the things that caught her eye. And that piece is so important for their development, I believe.
Absolutely. And you never know what's going to be that pivotal moment. What's that small thing going to be that triggers them that they just want to continue learning? That's great. And, one thing we haven't talked about, what you're doing now with being a fitness coach. Is that something how do you integrate your kids into that? I used to force my kids to come to core classes with me, that was before I was fluffy, to come to core classes with the promise of we'll go to the pool and play water basketball afterwards. So, are you incorporating your kids into your fitness regimen and the things that you're teaching others?
Yeah, so I was a fitness coach for quite a while and my kids were always really interested in fitness, and when I would do workouts, they would come down and wanna do workouts with me, and I don't do fitness coaching now, we've really changed that, I've branched out and I do, a lot of women's retreats, so we do a lot of hunting retreats, we do women's retreats in Alaska, in Canada, and in Idaho. And they're focused on getting women in the outdoors and giving them confidence and skills to go out and do things on their own and realize like my folks taught me, you can do whatever you want out here. We teach them survival skills, we teach them wilderness first aid and how to plan for a hunt and prep for a hunt and stay safe out there so that they feel confident to go out and do their own things. But even just the other day, I came downstairs and all 3 of my boys were down on my workout equipment, just kind of doing their own workout thing. The 3-year-old was on the rowing machine and he wasn't rowing, he was just moving. He was just moving on the rower. And my 8-year-old was walking on the treadmill, and then my 11-year-old was doing pull-ups on the pull-up bar. So them seeing mom, focus on those things and they know it's because I want to be able to go out and do these adventures. I want to go out and do these things and not be physically limited by my abilities. I want to be able to see a ridge or see a buck or see an elk and just be like, I'm going and be able to do it. And I think that focus on fitness kind of broadens it for kids. It's not about what you look like. It's about how you feel and how your body can perform and how healthy you are. And I think that focus has been a really good thing for my kids growing up.
Yeah, and that segues into them getting outside. They can do more outside and they can be more involved in the outdoors. Those retreats that you're talking about, is that something you want to mention? Is that something that you want people to be able to look up and find more information on?
Yeah, I don't run any of them myself. My boss, Tana Granda, who I did the health coaching through for years there, she's the one that runs the Alaska retreat and the Wild Women's Rendezvous, which is in Idaho. And that one is focused solely on giving women all the skills they need for hunting. We bring in over 20 instructors to that and they can learn long range shooting, regular rifle shooting, pistols, archery. We teach them, actually go out on hunts. We teach them how to break down animals in the field. We go back, we teach them butchering, we do foraging, we do survival skills, wilderness first aid. There's so many classes that women can take to learn the skills that they might be lacking in one area or another to help them grow their arsenal of skills for hunting. She runs those 2, and then I have a friend that I used to coach. She was one of my clients. She lives in Ontario, Canada, and she started a women's retreat in Ontario where we go to Algonquin National Park and we do a canoe trip for 5 days. And we take the girls back and we teach them all the same things. We teach them survival skills and wilderness first aid and fishing. And it's just a confidence builder, but it's also an opportunity for women to connect with other outdoor women. And they're really cool retreats. My boss's retreats, you can find them at Grenda's Getaways is the website. They do a lot of different things. They do fishing retreats and they do the women's retreats. And then my friend Chelsea, who runs the Ontario retreat, hers is Whiskey Creek Retreats is the name of that one.
Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that information. And that sounds amazing. We focus on daughters right now, but it's so important for everyone to be confident and know that they can go enjoy the wild at any time. And then, do you, one of the things, it's depending on where people listen to this at, it can be an interesting topic, but gun safety for kids. I put my kids through gun safety because we have guns throughout the house. I had aspirations of all of them hunting, right? Even though only 2 of them do. And there's so many camps for that. Like even in our little town of Palisade, we have the Forkhorn camp where it's youth hunting. It's 3 days you stay there and they've turned it into an entire experience. Is that something that you've pushed your kids to, they've naturally gravitated to, or how have you traversed that?
The gun safety itself. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously gun safety is incredibly important for our kids. You always see news articles, news stories about, tragedies that happen because of kids being around firearms and then, something happens. And it can happen to adults too. It's not just kids that can have these problems with firearms. So gun safety is incredibly important. And, for the hunting aspect of it, our kids go through a hunter safety course. Those hunter safety courses are pretty good about, teaching gun safety and including that in the material. But our kids learn it from day 1 in our home because like you said, we have firearms, we have pistols, we have rifles, we have, bows, anything from, even a knife. It's like
Absolutely.
helping kids to understand like these are tools and tools have a purpose and there's a proper way to use them and an improper way to use them. We keep our guns locked up. We don't, keep them within arm's reach of our kids. We've got little kids in the house,
Yeah,
but we also don't hide firearms from our kids. Like they are around them and they see them a lot. And whenever they're around them, we have conversations about safety and why we do things the way that we do. They see me carry a pistol all the time, and I'm constantly teaching my kids and in any opportunity that I get about the gun. It's like kids are going to be curious about anything. It's just like, alcohol, drugs, anything that can potentially endanger your child, they're going to be curious about it. So removing that curiosity and teaching them is one of the ways to help them, make better decisions about what they're going to do, whether it's like I said, alcohol, teach your kids about these things. Don't hide them from them because when they try to go and figure these things out on their own, that's when accidents can happen. Uh, so taking that curiosity away, I will, when I'm, working with my pistol or whatever, I'll unload it. My son's showing interest in it. I'm going to be like, here, hold it. And I'm going to teach you how this works. I'm going to teach you what this does. This is incredibly powerful. This can kill you. This can kill somebody else. This is not something that you ever touch when mom and dad aren't with you. This is something that you only handle when we're with you. And I teach them about, treating every firearm as if it's loaded. But I let them put their hands on it. I let them feel it. We take our sons out and let them shoot, give them opportunities to actually experience the firearms and shoot them. But we teach them about them with respect for what they are and what they're capable of and, how a proper tool is supposed to be used.
that's great. One of my daughters, she'll only grouse hunt. She won't deer hunt, but she loves to shoot. That's why I brought this up because it's just another segue. Like she'll grab my 10 millimeter Kimber and just sit and go through clip, clip, clip. And I'm just like, there's a dollar, there's a dollar. But anyway, it that's irrelevant because it's so soothing and so enjoyable to her. And once again, not everything has to go out and be about going out and harvesting something and bringing it back. It's matching to those things that they find of interest.
Yeah, and I think all of these things kind of come back, whether it's, the hunting aspect of it or the physical fitness aspect of it or the shooting. It all comes back to your kids building confidence and skills. And, like my son, he's pretty interested in, fitness and health, and my oldest son is. And I see it because one of the things that happens naturally with kids, they get with other kids. And they notice when they can't do something that somebody else can do, or they notice when they can do something better than everybody else can do. And the things that we teach our kids and the skills that we give our kids can either make or break their confidence. And if we're not investing that time and energy into giving our kids these skills, we're kind of setting them up for failure because they're going to go out and they're not going to be able to do some of the things that their peers are doing. My kids can go out and maybe their peers, can take a better selfie, or they can, play a better game on the Xbox or whatever. And I'm not going to completely keep those things from my kids because that's another way of ostracizing them in their circles. But when my kids go out and they can run faster, or they can climb a tree that another kid can't, or they bring their picture of their deer that they got to school or whatever, those are confidence building things. And in kids circles, those are huge. They're huge for kids um to have this self confidence and this knowing, like, I can go out and I can do this thing. I can go out and I can build a fire with a flint and steel, or I can do this. It just helps them to walk into their circles knowing who they are and what they're capable of, and with a bit of confidence that they wouldn't otherwise have. And I think that's really valuable for them.
Amazing. Because that's it. Without confidence, they can't accomplish anything.
Mhm.
So those simple things like climbing a tree, if that's a confidence building experience for them, that just leads them to greatness later on. So,
Yeah.
Lindsay, as we wind down, is there anything you can think of, that you would recommend? Think about the listeners. Think about a dad who now has a daughter trying to figure out, how do I get her to want to do things with me? Can you just wrap up with just a couple small things, a couple recommendations of very simple ways that you feel that you could help them integrate what they want to do with their daughter?
I think, we are all human. We might be the adult in the equation, but it doesn't always mean that we don't carry, things from our own childhood with us. And I think we have to set aside our own pride and our own desires when it comes to our kids. Um, and that can sometimes be hard to do because, like, maybe the goal is I really want to hunt with my kids. But the most important thing is that you have a connection with your kids. And you have to set aside your goals, your hunting goals, maybe whatever it is that you like. This is the main thing that I want to achieve. And that has to kind of be boiled down to I want to connect with my kid and I want to have a relationship with my kid. And that means meeting them where they are. And if you can build that connection with your kid and meet them where they are, find out what's really interesting to them and set aside your own, if they see you set aside your own stuff to connect with them with what interests them, then they're going to be more open and interested in what interests you. And if hunting is what your ultimate goal is, find that connection point with your kids and build on that. And then hopefully, if you go to introduce them into the outdoors or into hunting specifically, they're curious because they're curious about you. I was really curious about my dad. It wasn't just the hunting thing. It would have been whatever my dad was interested in, but he connected with me personally and helped me know that he was interested in me and he wanted to connect with me. And it just so happened that he was also a hunter. And so it naturally led us into hunting. Um, and so if that is your end goal, I would just say, find what your kid is interested in and connect with them on it and basically humble yourself into their world, and take your stuff out of the equation and just be with them, because that will connect them to you and make them interested in the things that make you passionate and make you the kind of dad that wants to connect with them.
Well said. And you know what? We can't thank you enough for being on the podcast today, Lindsay. Look for Lindsay's articles at Western Hunter. And Lindsay, thank you so much. And we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you.
Four girls running free down a gravel road, barefoot dreams where the tall pines grow, each one different, strong and true. I just thank God I get the view. From sunrise lines to firelight hours, watched them bloom like wildflowers. This is our story, wild and true. Girl, dad, outdoors, raising daughters with a view. Lines in the water, lessons in time. Some lead, some follow, some walk the line. I don't choose their roads, I just see them through, cheering every step they choose to do. From sunrise lines to firelight